folks, real quick before we get started, we did want to remind everyone that it looks like we are going to have greater than 100 members in this chat. Our chat room currently doesn't support over 100, so if you look below the video, you will notice that there are links to the forum and to the live stream chat. We can take your questions there if you can't get to the chat room. Without further ado, here is Jim Deeming.
Hello everybody, how you doing? Welcome to the first of 10 weeks of Fingerstyle Foundations. I'm glad you joined us, and most importantly, before we get started, if you don't have a guitar in your hands, go get one right now, because this is a two-way lesson here. I expect to be able to show you some things, and then I want you to play them along with me and start getting things wired into your fingers and actually trying this stuff out, not just watching. If you want to just watch something, you know, there's football and other things, but this is a participatory, I think I said that right, lesson, and so please have a guitar ready to go. We're going to talk for 10 weeks about foundations of fingerstyle, and I'm going to take an approach that maybe you haven't seen before. You can go out on YouTube and you can find videos where someone will show you how to play a particular pattern, fingerstyle pattern, and it might sound interesting. And then you'll be like, what do I do with that? Or I can't get it to work because the thumb and the fingers are tripping all over each other and it's confusing. How can I put this together and have it work? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take what I'm going to call a very thumb-oriented approach to this. We're going to get your thumb on its feet first and build our foundation around what your thumb is doing. We will add patterns later, we'll add melody notes and chord techniques, but we're going to start today particularly with the thumb. Before we do that, I want to, Jeff's got a question.
It's not a question, just one more reminder. We are officially over 100, so in case anyone cannot see the chat room to know what's going on, if you can't get in, there's a button below the video or there's some text below the video that has a link to live stream or to our forums. Please go ahead and click one of those links, and we will take your questions there. And Jim, if you could remind people every so often of those links, that would be great.
Will do. All right. So fingerstyle is a big tent. There's a lot of different music, a lot of different actual fingerstyle techniques that are different. You can cover a lot of different genres of music, different styles, a lot of different voices of the guitar can be brought out using sometimes really different, sometimes only slightly different thumb and finger techniques. My background, as you can see, is primarily using a thumb pick and playing more in the either Merle Travis or Chet Atkins style. There's also classical guitar. There's also various folk music styles, different approaches with or without the thumb pick, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. If you happen to have a thumb pick and want to start that way, great. That would be my personal recommendation. If you don't and you want to use only your thumb, I'm going to briefly describe the difference between the two, and then I'll answer the question of which one should you do. Okay, my thumb pick is worn just right across where the nail, see if I can get this on camera for you. There we go. At the beginning of where the nail grows and joins your finger here, right around that line, put that on there so it's good and snug. There's different sizes of thumb picks, there's different thicknesses of thumb picks, and a lot of different shapes. And if you want to go down that path of a thumb pick, you're going to have to experiment probably quite a bit to find one that works for you and that is comfortable. Having said that, if you're not used to wearing a thumb pick, almost none of them are going to feel comfortable at first. It's something that you do have to get used to over time. If you're playing without a thumb pick, chances are you're relying a little bit on your nail to dig into the string and get a little bite. My nail is actually at the moment too long to do this. You're playing off kind of the corner of your thumb here. Classical players might even have it more pointed in directly depending on who your teacher was and what your style is. Either way, with or without a thumb pick, you can still do what we're going to start with today, which is orienting some thumb patterns around chord shapes. As far as fingernails, I always get asked about that. I prefer to have my nails just a little bit longer than the tips of my fingers, so that when I play the strings with my fingers, the skin, the flesh of the finger touches the strings first, and then we pull or sweep the nail through the string. This gives you a little bit of control over how aggressive your fingers are And what we'll find later is that you're going to want to learn to balance the intensity of your thumb attack and your finger attacks. So I find that a little bit of nail helps me do that. That's not a requirement. Some great guitar players play fingerstyle with their nails either trimmed or bitten down to the nubs, and they rely on calluses on their picking fingers. Either way is fine. So to the question, what should you do first? How should you start? I recommend that you find a guitar player or guitar players that you really like the sound of and that you wouldn't mind emulating for the first phase of your fingerstyle guitar career. That doesn't mean that someday you won't make your own sound or try other things. But while you're learning, emulation is one of the best teachers. And when you can compare how you're sounding to somebody that you like, I think you'll find that you'll learn a lot faster and you'll be more comfortable. So thumb pick or not, fingernails or not, those are personal preference choices. And they will work all the way through what we're going to be doing in this course. We have 10 weeks to cover some foundations. And I hope by the end of this 10 weeks, you're well on your way to not only being able to play accompaniment behind a singer, accompaniment with another instrumentalist or even a band, or maybe you want to do solo fingerstyle arrangements where you are the band. You're playing the bass, the rhythm, the chords, and the melody notes all at once. Those are all possibilities here, and it's a lot of fun. It's a really interesting style to listen to, and I hope you have as much fun with it as I do. What we're going to do to orient our thumb, I'm going to do another reminder here. If you're in the room and there's more than 100 people and you can't type in the chat, there's a link at the bottom of the video that should give you an alternate overflow window so that you can participate. We're going to take questions along the way, although we're going to try to stay on topic for a little while. It'll be a little bit more open toward the end of the session. But I will try to get to at least the relevant questions before we're done today. And so please follow along with me with your guitar. Electric, acoustic, nylon string, steel string, doesn't matter. That all works for what we're doing today. All right, I'm going to take a thumb and chord shaped approach for getting us started. Okay, what we're going to be after is that we're going to get a little bit of an alternating thumb going on here, and that's going to be our bass player, and it's going to set the tempo of what we're playing. And then depending on what chord shape we're playing, the notes that we bounce back and forth between the different strings with the thumb are going to maybe not play the entire chord, of course, but it's going to play notes in the chord. So it should give us a real full sound, right? We got bass, rhythm, and chords. And actually today, we're going to do very little work with the fingers because the thumb is our focus. So what I'm going to do by way of example is we're going to take a G chord and we're going to start alternating the thumb, in this case between the 6th string and the 4th string. And we're talking about the 6th string being the biggest one, the closest one to you, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, down to the little strings. So the thumb is starting on the 6th string and alternating to the 4th. And before you get too far down the path of trying this yourself, I want to explain to you why we're doing this. We're starting here for a very specific reason. This is our G chord, and this is a G note in that chord, and it's the lowest G note. We call that the root note. And what you're going to find for the next several weeks is that our thumb pattern, when we count out a measure, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, if you get lost, you want to know that always, 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 the downbeat or the first beat of any measure is going to be the root note of whatever chord you're on. So in this case, root note is G, chord is G. So the pattern starts 6th string and then alternates to the 4th string. We're going to start off with a simple thumb pattern. This is just 2 strings right now. We'll go a little farther than that toward the end of the lesson. But this works. If I have a G chord going on there, those 2 bass notes sound pretty good over the top of that. And so what we want to do is build a rhythm around this G chord. So Chris, if you could bring up page 1 of the first tab. I have 2 tabs for you. Let's deal with the first one. This tab is intended to show you what the thumb patterns are for each of your your basic first position chord shapes. And having said that, I'm going to move a little bit fast. If you don't already know all of your basic C, A, G, E, D, maybe your B7, maybe only one bar chord, the F down here, we're going to get through the first position chords and what their bass notes are. So the point of this tab is to show you the chord, and then what you can see from that first measure where we have the pattern, there's that third finger, third fret, root note right there, and then you can see what the thumb is doing is what I just showed you, alternating 6/4. We're going to stay on this first line of the tab. There is a repeat there at the end of that line. That doesn't mean only repeat this once. That's just repeat 10,000 times on this line for what we're doing right now. I showed you in the tab playing a couple fingers in there. That's not the important part. That's just to show you that there is a G chord here. We're holding a G chord. Nothing over here is moving. We're totally focused on the thumb. And we're doing a 4-count pattern here. So if you wanted to count this out loud, it would be 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And you would keep doing that for however long you're on a G chord, okay? The root note being on the 6th string means that to get some other alternate string on the bass, we don't want to play the 6th string over and over again, right? We want something more interesting. So in this case, we're alternating to the 4th string. And most of our thumb patterns, with one exception, the thumb is going to be playing in the lower 3 strings of the guitar, strings 4, 5, and 6. If it helps you stabilize your right hand, for now, you might want to rest your other 3 fingers, your 1st, 2nd, and 3rd finger, on the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd strings. You don't have to play them there, but it's kind of a nice way to steady your hand, and then your fingers are ready to go when we start using them. So use that to stabilize your hand if you want, and then start working that pattern, okay? 6th string, 4th string. And what I want to do now is I'm just going to play this for a minute, and I'd like you to play it along with me. G chord, thumb on the 6th and the 4th strings, and nothing's moving other than your thumb. Ready? Go. Try to play it as smoothly and steady as you can.
Hey Jim, there's someone saying the tab is different than what you're playing. I just wanted to confirm that we are playing the right exercise.
Yep, what I'm looking at, as I said, the tab, we're only on the first line, and actually, other than the sample G chord at the beginning, you really only need that, what's labeled as measure 2 there. And don't worry about the finger parts for now. We're only playing the thumb line, and we're not going any farther than that first thumb pattern measure. Okay, this is thumb only right now. Did that answer the question? All right. Now we're going to go to the next line, and you'll see that I have 2 chords called out there, the E chord and the E minor chord. And I dealt with those both on this line because if you look at what I've written there, the E chord and the E minor chord have exactly the same bass notes. You really don't have to play both chords today, but I put them there so that you could see that whether I'm playing an E chord or an E minor, the bass notes are these. And again, it's this pattern on the thumb is the 6th string first, then the 4th string, and then back and forth. Why? Because this is an E chord, and that open E on the 6th string is your root note, so that's beat 1. And that's true for both the E and the E minor. Okay, so that's why I put those 2 together for you to experiment and repeat. You're going to find that you'll move through these first ones pretty fast because your thumb on the right side is doing exactly the same thing. All you're doing is holding a different chord shape. So play it with me. Let's do the E chord for just a minute. you to listen and feel. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1. Feel that downbeat. Emphasize it a little bit. So that's your E chord and your E minor. The next line in the tab, and I'm going in this order for a very specific reason, the next one is your F chord. Alright, the F chord, like the other two chords we've done, has a root note on the 6th string. Okay, in this case, your F on the 1st fret, 6th string, that's the root note of your F chord. You may not want to hold this one too long, so let's get going on practicing. 6th string, 4th string. And you can also see from the tab that the F minor, only difference is you lift your middle finger, but when we're playing on the 6th and 4th string, nothing's changed. Same two bass notes for the F and the F minor. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Are you tired of that bar chord yet? If you want to learn an alternate real quick, here's a freebie for you. Put your thumb over the top if you can, and play your F chord that way. You may not all be able to do that or want to, but it's a handy option. There's your F chord, okay? So there's 5 chords, G, E, E minor, and F and F minor. Did I count that right? Yes, 5. Thank you. And they all have exactly the same thumb pattern because they all have their root note on the 6th string. So let's talk about what happens when we go to a different chord and the root note is on a different string. Classic example is our good old cowboy C chord. There's your C chord, and now the root note is on the 5th string. You can kind of guess that that's going to change what we do with our thumb. So what I'm going to do here now, and if you want to bring up page 2 of the tab, we'll look at where else we can put our thumb to get a nice alternating pattern. And now we're going to go 5th string and alternate to the 4th string. Okay? Again, downbeat, 1 beat is the root note of that C chord. The alternate is the 4th string underneath it. Okay? And now we want to keep rhythm. We want to count 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Do it with me. Play it smooth, steady. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. There's your C chord. And now I'll bet you can guess that the next couple of chords I'm going to show you are going to be similar. We're going to find another chord that we know that has its root note on the 5th string. That would be the A chord. Now our root note is the open 5th string over the A chord. So that's our starting point for our thumb. And again, we're going to do a 5th string, 4th string pattern. Now we've got our A chord going. Downbeat. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And as you can see from the other chord on that line, it's exactly the same for A minor. Same exact bass notes. Your thumb doesn't change and the notes you're playing doesn't change. Okay? So you can practice those two chords together, either one or both, okay? Now we're going to come to our exception to what I said earlier, where I said your thumb would mostly play strings 6, 5, and 4. And then we had a pattern where we did strings 5 and 4, because our root note went to the 5th. Now there's 2 chords we know that have the root note on the 4th string, the D chord. All right. Now, on the D chord, we're going to start running out of strings, right? Because if I keep alternating, starting on the downbeat on the root note, and then I alternate to the string underneath it, there's only 2 strings left. Remember when I had you rest your 3 fingers here, getting ready for the rest of the chord later? Well, that you can't do that on a D chord, because the thumb needs to play on the 3rd string, okay? So just shift your fingers down. Now you're resting fingers 1 and 2 on strings 1 and 2, and do that D bass note pattern. Downbeat is on the open 4th string. That's your D, that's your root note, and then your alternate pattern is the 3rd string. And then you'll see from the rest of that line of tab, the D chord and the D minor have exactly the same root note, exactly the same bass note, and your thumb is playing exactly the same thing. Excuse me. I like to play the D minor with my pinky. D minor. I want to stop and make sure that everybody understands what we're doing and why I laid that tab out there. Remember, review. The thumb is going to start with the root note, so I put the chords together that have the same starting string for the root note, right? On the 3rd string, that was the G chord, the F chord, and the E. All their root notes are on the 6th string. And then we went with the starting beat with the root note on the 5th string. That was our C chord, our A, and our A minor. And then we went to the D and the D minor because that starts our thumb pattern on the 4th string. I think this might be a good time to double check and see how we're doing. Are there any questions or anything anybody's finding particularly difficult?
Yeah, we do have one question, Jim. And the question is, do you recommend using a metronome when you're doing this? They noticed that you weren't necessarily counting, but...
Yes, I do, and if you have that and you're already comfortable with that, go ahead and get started doing that. I am going to deal quite a bit with the metronome in a couple of weeks. I wanted to get you some tools in your toolkit first, just to be able to get that thumb going, but the metronome is going to become an integral part of our practice and our training coming up. If you're already comfortable with that, go right ahead, but there will be much more on metronomes coming up. And if anybody doesn't know what he's asking about, he or she's asking about, metronome is basically just a timekeeper, an audible timekeeper, like a clock ticking, and you could practice your thumb beats to that to smooth out your timing and your playing. I chose to deal with that just a little bit later because that's almost, for some people, another coordination effort. Right now we want to try to get the thumb going, and then we're going to add the fingers next week, and then I want to add the metronome after that, because sometimes it feels like walking and chewing gum and patting your belly and rubbing your head and all that stuff all at once. So I didn't want to overwhelm people yet with the metronome, but it's coming. Anything else? Okay, good to go. Now I'm going to give you an alternative to this alternating thumb pattern, okay? If you're desiring to play more of the Chet Atkins style playing, where the thumb pattern is just a little more complex, that kind of thing, what we're doing there is still alternating the thumb, but now we're going to use a different pattern that involves 3 strings for the thumb, okay? And I want to check my tab and see which chord I started you with. Chris, if you could bring up the tab for 3-string bass notes. I actually started with the G chord again. That's good, that's consistent. We're going to start with the pattern being the root note again on this 1st string, or 6th string, excuse me. Same rule applies on the downbeat of any measure, and there's going to be 4 beats per measure. We're still going to always start with the root note of the chord as the downbeat, and then just like we did before, we'll go to that 4th string, okay? Then what we're going to do for the 3rd beat is, instead of coming back to the root note, we're going to go to the 5th string and get that B note on the 5th string, and then back to the 4th string. So instead of this 6 4 6 4, we're going to go 6 4 5 4. All right. This might throw you for a loop if you haven't done it before, which is why I gave you both thumb patterns. If all the farther you get is the 2-string bass note for now, that's fine. We can still do fingerstyle patterns later with this thumb pattern. But for those of you that might be a little farther along, or the chat style is what you're after, you're going to want to get started early on a 3-string alternating thumb pattern, okay? Don't let that fool you. There's 3 strings involved, 4 beats. It's because we're hitting the 4th string twice. 6 4 5 4. That's our measure. 1 2. This is our count now. 1 2 3 4. 1 2 3 4. That's how you would count this out. Play it with me if you can. This is at exactly the same pace as what we're doing now. It's not more notes, it's just 3 notes instead of 2. Okay? So let's get the 2 next easy ones out of the way because they're the same exact thumb pattern, right? E and E minor. Once again, same exact pattern on the right hand, same exact bass notes. It works for both the E and the E minor chord. So it's 6 4 5 4. Just play your E chord on the left hand and don't worry about it. Don't need to move anything on your left hand. Just hold that chord and play this pattern. 6 5 4. Excuse me. 6 4 5 4. 6 4 5 4. If you're like me, you'll find that it's really hard to talk and play fingerstyle at the same time, especially when you're on camera in front of 10,000 people. Is that where we're at, Jeff?
Not quite.
Okay. So that's the idea. And then again, for E minor, you can hear this. I play the E minor chord, but then when I start in on the thumb, you don't hear anything different. Same bass notes, same pattern, same strings, right? Could you guess? Yep, the F chord, our other 6-string root note chord, same pattern, just hold that chord. And the strings on the thumb are 6 4 5 4. 6 4 5 4. People ask me all the time, what are some good exercises I can do to strengthen my hands for playing bar chords? Here's one. How long can you do this? It's the principle though, right? 6-string root note, that's our pattern.
Hey, Tim, we just had a comment from somebody that I thought you'd like to know. They said it's very helpful that you're speaking out what to play because they don't read the tab. So they just asked me to pass that on.
Okay.
That it's very helpful. I did also just one more time want to remind you guys the chat room is full. If you can't get into the chat room, click the link below the video. There's a link to live stream or a link to our forum. You can ask your questions there. We'll still get them. You can still interact just the same way. So please don't hesitate.
Okay. Now let's take this 3-string thumb pattern to the chords where the root note is now on the 5th string. Remember those? It was C, A, and A minor. Okay. Now we're going to change the thumb pattern, and now we have to start on the root note, which is now the 5th string. So what kind of a pattern are we going to do here with 3 different strings? Remember before we were only doing this, 5th string, 4th string, and that's the first 2 bass notes we're going to do now. Did you notice on the other pattern, the beat that changed in the pattern was the 3rd beat. We played the same thumb pattern except that we changed what note we were doing on the 3rd beat. Same thing's going to happen here. 1 2 3 4. This was our old pattern. Watch what I do on the 3rd beat. 1 2 3 4. I moved that third beat. Now, you have an option here. Maybe you know how to play the full big 6-string C chord. This is what most people play, but if you want all 6 strings, you might move that ring finger down there and get the C note with your pinky, and then nothing has to move. You can play this pattern. I'm going to encourage you not to do this, and here's why. Look at my left hand. All my fingers are tied up. I got nothing left for melody notes or chord variation. All right? So what I want to do is I want to free up that pinky. That does a lot of the work for melody notes later on. So practice this if you don't already know it. Move that ring finger on your left hand back and forth from the 5th string to the 6th string. After you're done playing it, move it back where it was. So now this pattern, 5, 4, 6, 4, 5, 4, 6, 4. If you watch my left thumb or my left hand, you can see that that ring finger is just barely moving to cover 2 strings as I play them. This might be a little bit of a coordination challenge for you, but this is what you want. So you've got 2 new things going on here now. You're trying to get used to a new thumb pattern over here. And you might be getting used to moving that ring finger to get that G note in our pattern on the 6th string. Alright, and that's it. That's the C chord. I'm going to take a tuning break here. You hear it? My 6th string has gone just a little sharp. Clean that up. Oh, and I overdid it. Don't make me get the tuner out. Alright, now let's do our other chords where the root note is still on the 5th, so the right hand thumb pattern doesn't change. For the A chord, 5, 4, 6, 4, downbeat. 1, 2, 3, 4, downbeat. 2, 3, 4, root note. Got it? And the same pattern holds for the A minor. And that's all there is to that. So the same right hand thumb pattern works for those 3 chords, again, because our root note is starting on the 3rd string. Root note for a C is there, root note for an A is an open 5th, root note for the A minor is the same, okay? Now let's get to the really weird one. Our root note for the D minor chord is on the 4th string. So again, we're gonna go down into the small strings now with our thumb. We're gonna let that thumb play the 3rd string again like it did before on beats 2 and 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, but we're gonna move that 3rd beat to a different string. We're gonna move it to the 5th. That's what it looks like. Strings here are 4, 3, 5, 3, 4, 3, 5, 3. And of course, the same thing is true for the D minor. Same notes, same strings, same everything. The important part is 1 count, the 1st beat, is that root note. Just don't move, you just play that pattern. Okay, so that basically gets you through. Those are your most important, most common thumb patterns. We addressed chords where the root note is on the 6th string, chords with a root note on the 5th string, and chords with root notes on the 4th string. Beyond that, it gets complicated, and we don't want to deal with that this week because I want you to get started with this and practice these. Any questions about the 3-string bass note or anything else we've covered so far? Jeff says no questions so far. Okay. Well, we're at the end of the new material, so your homework assignment is to take what we've covered here And remember I reminded you that this tab is not meant to be played straight through from top to bottom. I gave you basically a topic per line, right? Deal with six string root note chords on one line. You should play that over and over again. And then fifth string root notes. Work on those over and over again. And then fourth string root notes. Then if you want to if you want to challenge yourself a little bit, if you're familiar with playing chords in a key, try changing things up where in each chord change you have a different root note, okay? Got a question, Chris?
Yeah, some of the guys were wondering if you meant to skip the B7 on the tab.
I may have. I left that one out. Thank you for reminding me. Back to root notes on the fifth string. Okay, remember that we had C and A. Left out a really important one here, the B or B7. I'm going to play a B7 here. And everything else is the same because in this B7 chord, the root note is on the fifth string. So if you wanted to do a two-string bass like we started with, alternate between the fifth and the fourth string. And it's just like what you were doing before with the C and the A chord, fifth string, fourth string, and you're just holding that chord. Both those bass notes are in that chord, so you don't have to move your left hand. Just play the pattern. Now, if you want to do the three-string bass note for the B7, you got to do the same thing we did with that C chord because our pattern now is going to be fifth string, fourth string, sixth string, fourth string. So I'm moving my middle finger back and forth between the fifth and the sixth string to pick up those two bass notes. That's nice. Just keep track and make sure that your downbeat, your one beat, is that B, that root note. Okay? So what I really want you to get from this whole lesson is a thought process and a visualization that whenever I see a chord, I see a C chord, whenever I look at a chord shape on my left hand, I want to have done this enough that when I ask my thumb to start playing a pattern, it starts to become automatic. That thumb knows I got to hit that root note and then play some kind of a pattern behind it. But job one is on the downbeat. When I see that C chord, that's the first thing my thumb's got to play. When I see a G chord, that root note and thumb need to be together, and that's where I want to start. If I play an A minor, first thing I want to hear is that thumb on that root note, on that open fifth string. Okay, this is an orientation process of looking at your chords, and for me, it's the way I think of the chord. When I see the chord, I'm looking there. I'm visually looking at that root note. To me, that's the most important part of that chord, especially when I'm changing between chords. Think about this. If you start getting into this technique where when I go to a chord, and let's just assume we're in this ideal world where chord changes always happen on the downbeat, which isn't always true, but let's assume it did, and I'm making a chord transition from the C to the F. Here I am on this C, and I'm thinking about that bad old bar chord F coming up. One thing I know, when I go to that F, that's the first thing I gotta hit, is that F note on that bass when I get there. And then when I go from the F to the G is the first thing I hit. Now I'm gonna slow this down and let you see something in slow motion that might help you with chord transitions while you're playing fingerstyle. Did you see what happened when I was on the big bad F chord and I'm coming along on my pattern? Really, this is slow motion. Watch what happens when I change to the G. I moved this finger first while I'm relaxing everything else, and boy was it happy to be relaxed after that bar chord. I'm taking the time that my pattern gives me. I only need that note first. It doesn't matter that I don't have the rest of the G chord put together, because right now, that's the most important note I gotta hit. And and then I can finish the chord as I'm coming into the rest of the pattern. Does that make sense? Let's go from here to the C chord. I'm visually looking at my left hand and I'm saying, when I do C chord, that's my note I need more than anything else first. So I'm in my G chord, play that root note first, no matter what, and then build the rest of the chord around it. Let me show you what this looks like at bluegrass tempo. Watch for what I just described to you when I'm in these patterns and I'm changing from C, F to G. Can you see that? I'm not doing a hard immediate chord change. I'm, what would you call it? Fading. Okay, it takes a little bit of the pressure off of getting an immediate instant chord change. Go for the root note first and then fill everything else in. Let me know if that helps any of you, or if that's something that you've tried before or never thought of, or what do you think of that? That's a technique that I think you'll like, especially as your speed comes up.
All right, Jim, we got a question here from Greg GP. He says, I assume this pattern is mostly common in country. Is that true?
That's a good question. I would say, well, I could read your question two different ways. If I'm playing country music, is that the pattern I'm going to do mostly? Or is your question, if I'm playing that pattern, country music is pretty much what it's for? Yes and no to both questions, okay? It's a very useful pattern, but what we're going to learn later is that we can do some things in the way we play that pattern and palm muting and some other things that we'll introduce that can change the feel of that groove. For example, some people would say, if you're doing the line between blues and country, just like the line between blues and rock, kind of has a big middle area there. And these kind of patterns, both of these, the 2-string bass and the 3-string bass, you'll see that for sure in both country and blues and bluegrass. And then depending on how you play it, works pretty well for rock too. Rockabilly, southern rock, various places. So I don't consider it a really rigid, isolated genre pattern, if that makes sense. Does that answer your question? Give him a chance to respond.
I think he did. He did put up inquiring about the second pattern, I think. Maybe the 3-note where you go down below. I'm not sure exactly. I'm interpreting that, but he might be asking about the second pattern where your root's on the A. Yeah, that is what he was asking about.
Well, so if you're asking specifically about the pattern where it starts on the 5th string, I can see why you would think that, because this bass is now doing a 1-5 bounce. If you've ever hung around bass players, you know about that. That does have a country lilt to it, I guess. But in the context of a song, again, how we play it, we could change that groove up quite a bit. If I was trying to think of an example, and the one that's coming to mind actually changes back to the 2-string, right? So that goes more to a folk feel. But again, I'll give you a little tip here, what's coming in a future lesson. When we start tinkering with palm muting and the sustain of the guitar, that does lots to change what the song feels like, okay? So I wouldn't lock it into only country, but I think it's fair to say that it's tends to be, at face value, probably a country or bluegrass, sometimes blues type of a feel for sure. What else? No more questions? All right. Does anybody have any questions about what to do with the homework this week? Because I really do want you to spend some time and Job one, right, is the root note of every chord shape. Lock that thumb in on the root note.
Hey Jim, since we still have a little bit of time
Yep.
and there's not a lot of questions yet until they start coming in, do you think maybe it would be possible to do like a really quick guided homework session with you now and then they could do it
Yep.
more on their own later?
Yep. All right. We'll do that. We'll tackle it twice. Once with the 2-string thumb pattern, and then we'll do it again with the 3-string pattern. And I'll give you a half a dozen measures of each chord. And I'll try to go in the order of your tab for readability. But remember now, I'm not playing from top to bottom through the tab on one take, all right? This is just each line. You should consider each line in this something that you should loop over and over again several times before you move on to the next chord. So let's start with the G, and this is the 2-string pattern. Nice and slow. I do want you to hold that whole chord shape down, even though we're not playing all of it. This is as much grounding visually and left hand, connecting that shape to your thumb. So hold that whole G chord down, even though we're not playing it all. This is on purpose. Now let's switch to the E chord. Do it with me. 6th string and 4th string. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. And now let's give this some E minor time here. 2, 3, 4. See how I'm doing that? Strum that chord once just so you hear it and feel it, and you're fretting it with your left hand, and then focus on how that thumb is just smoothly doing the same thing over and over and over again. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, here comes the workout. Let's get that F. Ready? Go. And before we get tired, let's get the F minor. Now, before we move on to the next page and the next string, let me just give you an example of while you're rehearsing this. Let's say that you got that down and it's getting a little boring. Speed it up a little bit. You're probably going to have to look at your thumb sometimes because you may not have the feel just yet of that gap. See how we're skipping from the 6th to the 4th string? Sometimes it takes a while to get your thumb get used to how wide that gap is. You don't want to be missing the 4th string, right? If you're jumping down from the 6th string and you come down too early and accidentally hit this one, or you go too far and miss, that's what these repetitions are designed to do. We're programming this into your muscle memory, okay? I want that thumb to absolutely know where strings 3, 4, 5, and 6 are, without, hopefully eventually without you having to look at it. So when you get better, start picking up the tempo and see if it's still smooth. And the same thing goes for your other patterns. Let me give you some more reps now. Let's do this on the 5th string root notes. 2-string bass. We did the C chord first. Practice these a few times with me. 1, 2, 3, 4. Root note. 2, 3, 4. Downbeat. 2, 3, 4. remember, hold that whole chord, even if we're not playing it. Now let's get that A chord next. Ready? Experiment with emphasizing that downbeat more and less. Give it a lot on the downbeat. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, and then try making them all the same. Same thing for A minor. And let's not forget our friend the B7 this time. Ready? Same thing, root notes on the 5th. 1, 2, 3, 4, down B, 3, 4. And then again, you're going to want to practice these, start creeping up your tempo a little bit with the 5th string root notes. Okay, so you get the idea. And then you would do the same thing with the D. Remember our pattern here? 4th string and then 3rd string. Double time. Okay. Again, one more time for review. Work through all those patterns where your root notes are on each of those 3 strings. Focus on that root note. Visualize it with that chord shape so that when you look at the C chord, you know where that root note is, and your thumb on the right hand knows where that root note is and always starts there. All right? Any questions?
Yeah, I'm going to jump in with just a couple quick questions here before you get to the 3-note homework there. This one is from Greg GP. He missed the first half hour, so he's wondering about the strum. Do you strum that once to facilitate the transition between the chords, and can it be done without the strum?
Okay, good question. And the way I introduced this is that playing the rest of the chord with your right hand is really not our focus today. The thumb is completely the focus. To give you an example in the tab, I showed you the whole chord on the first measure, and then in for example, measure 2, you'll see that I had a little bit of the chord underneath it. That's only meant to be an example, and I probably should have left that out because I really want you focused on your thumb, okay? Not playing anything else with your fingers or strumming, okay? Today is thumb day only, all right? The chords, the reason for that stuff being in the tablature is if you didn't already know that chord or where parts of that chord were, I wanted to show that to you, but again, I'm trying to tie a thumb pattern to a chord shape, okay? We're not dealing with fingers yet or strumming yet today. That's next week, okay? I really believe that one of the things that makes it hard for people to get thumb and fingers working together is they try to do both at once at the very first. So my approach here for this course is let's start with the thumb. That's why I want you to do all these reps with the thumb only through all the different chords, is that with a lot of repetition on this, by next week, we want that thumb to have an idea what to do, because what we're going to do next week is we're going to start talking to the fingers, and we want the thumb to be pretty comfortable on autopilot. It won't be quite autopilot next week, but we want to get that started. Again, I talk about muscle memory. We want that thumb to know what to do without us having to tell it every individual movement. An analogy that I've heard and use a lot is like riding a bicycle. You get on the bicycle to go to 7-Eleven, you get on your bicycle and you think about where 7-Eleven is. You don't think about where to put your feet on the pedals and how to balance with the handlebars and all that stuff, and pedal every cycle hoping you're not going to fall down. You get on your bike and you go to 7-Eleven. Translate that to what we're doing here. I want you to get to the point to where I want to hear a certain sound. I want to hear this. All right, and that's the sound I want to hear. And I want to be comfortable enough with my thumb that I can say, okay, thumb, you go make that sound, and then I'm going to go worry. I can worry about the melody, or I can worry about what my fingers are playing and things like that. And I want the thumb to be on autopilot. That's the key. When we talk about thumb independence, everybody's really focused on, well, yeah, I know what that means. That means my thumb is doing something different than my fingers. Well, it is, but the way we get there is we make that thumb your bicycle. The fingers are going to be where you're going, okay? The thumb is the background and the foundation for it. So that's why we're taking this approach, okay?
And the next question is, and you've answered it a little bit already, but OCS 1986 was wondering if you could explain muscle memory. I think the bicycle thing was a good analogy.
Muscle memory. So basically my analogy about riding the bicycle is exactly that. Because you've ridden a bicycle so many times, you don't have to think about how to ride a bicycle when you want to go to the store. You just get on the bike and go. It really is achievable that you can do the same thing with your thumb. You can get to the point to where you think about and listen for the sound you want, and your thumb will do that and lay it in the background. And then again, you're focusing on your fingers and other things. Muscle memory is a lot of different stuff on the guitar. If I ask you to play a C chord, hopefully you can play a C chord without having to get the book out and say, okay, this finger goes here, and this one here, and this one here, and then you play it. That's fine for while you're learning it. It's not very useful if you're in a band and the song is going down the road and you have to look and think about how to, by the time you do that, the chord's already gone and they're in E flat all of a sudden and you're behind, right? So muscle memory is basically just doing enough repetition that you just tell your fingers or think to your fingers, I want the C chord, go make it happen. And they don't need individual micromanagement to get there, okay? That's what we're after with the thumb. And that's what muscle memory is.
Okay, great. One more question here from Rich, 1165. It says, I know the first bass note is the root, but what is the other bass note in the scale? Is it always the fifth?
It's not always. If there was a musical reason why you wanted that to be the case, you could make that happen, but you might find that it limits your patterns. And just by way of background, in case not everyone knows what Rich is asking, the root note, let's say the C chord, the root note is a C note. And when I'm in the key of C and playing that C chord, we call that the one note. And then I start going through the scale and I number those notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So from C, D, E, F, G to a G, that's an interval of 5. If I play C and G together, that's a fifth, right? Well, there's another G. That's this one down here. So maybe if you were a cowboy strummer, you might strum this way. You've heard this before. So I'm still starting on that root note, but now I'm going down to that G note, which happens to be a fifth. So Rich is asking me if I'm going for a certain interval with every pattern, and we're not. And let me give you an example of where that breaks down. When I was talking about the three-string patterns, three-string thumb patterns, remember when we started this one, we were going 6, 4, I'm talking about string numbers now, 6th string, 4th string, 5th string, 4th string. That's not the intervals. If you look at this, 1, 2, 3, I'm going to a 3rd there and a 5th there. So I'm going 1, 5, 3, 5. I'm talking about intervals now. That pattern is not the same 1, 5, 3, 5. That's not the same interval pattern as this, which is 1 to a 3rd, 5th, 3rd, 1, 3, 5, 3. So you can see that I'm more focused on getting an interesting and solid pattern for the chord than I am the exact interval. You could lay something out, I guess, and be real strict if you wanted fifths all the time. But you'd have to make that pattern fit the song that you're doing. So for right now, again, I'd rather that you focus on a chord shape, where that root note is, and then for now, either the 2-string pattern that we covered or the 3-string pattern that we covered, and don't worry if the interval pattern isn't the same all the way through, because it does work. Okay?
Another question from Norma Jacks, wondering why the F chord is a bar chord rather than 3 positions shown in the diagram. That makes sense there.
The F chord is in 3 positions shown. What this? I'm looking for the chord. Well, I want you to play the bar chord there if you can, okay? Because again, our focus is root notes and chord shapes, but everybody can't play the F chord. So what you can do as an alternate is you can play the thumb over the top and only fret those 3 notes. But I'm not seeing what in the tab that you're asking about, other than that. Remember what I said. Today I want you playing the root notes and the thumb notes of however you play the F chord. All right. You got to start with that root there, and then you can play it this way or this way. Either way, whatever works. All right. Basically, think thumb only today. Hold the whole chord down, but only play with the thumb today.
Okay. Another one here from B minor.
Is it necessary to use the thumb on the 3rd string for the D and the D minor chord, given the patterns that I gave you today? Yes, it is. We're doing 4th string, 3rd string, and we want that thumb playing the bass notes, okay? So in this case, that bass note I'm after is on the 3rd string. So yes, it's not only necessary, it is okay. I have heard, like you probably have too, some fingerstyle players try to establish a hard rule that the thumb only plays the big 3 and the fingers only play the little 3. That's a nice starting point, but that's a rule that you almost, as in the case of the D chord, we're breaking that rule already. Okay, so it's not a problem, and in this case, it's necessary to play the thumb on the 3rd string, yes.
Okay, I think that's it for the moment. I don't know if you wanted to continue on the homework review for the 3-note pattern.
Okay, we could do, let me give some samples, some more rehearsal time on the 3-string patterns. And again, that starts with the G chord. Let's do a few laps on this. Again, we're holding the whole chord down, not picking anything with our fingers, just the thumb, but got that whole chord fretted, ready for next week. And I was gonna do 3-string bass patterns now, wasn't I? Here we go. Let me try that again. Sorry. 6th string, 4th string, 5th, 4th, 6, 4, 5, 4, 6, 4, 5, 4. let's get that E chord. And then without stopping or changing anything, lift your left index finger, turns this E chord into an E minor chord, but nothing sounds different. We're not playing anything different. This pattern, these bass notes work for the E major and the E minor chord. Now let's get that F. And the F minor is the same, just lift your middle finger down is F, middle finger up is F minor, but there's no change to the bass notes, no change to the pattern. Now let's get to root notes on the 5th string with a 3-string bass pattern. Remember this one? 5, 4, 6, 4. And what chord? I need the next page, Chris. I'm trying to remember which chord we started. Yeah, we did start with a C. Okay. Basic C chord. 6, 4. 5, 4, 6, 4. Our root note is the 5th string. Let's get some time in on this. A chord. Same exact pattern as the C chord. Why? Because the root note's still on the 5th string. Open 5th string is our A. Same with the A minor. Doesn't sound any different, and it isn't. The only thing different is what shape you're holding down with your left hand. And then the last two with the root note on the 4th string are D and D minor. And the pattern is 4th string, 3rd string, 5th string, 3rd, 4, 3, 5, 3. Excuse me, I messed up. I was about to talk. Let's go to the D minor. Same bass notes, same pattern, same root note. There you go. Practice those at several different tempos, several different chords, and then we'll add to it next week. What else you got, Chris?
I've got a question about the C chord from Dan. He's wondering how he could avoid a pull-off sound when switching the finger from the 5th to the 6th string. Or is that a good thing?
It could be a good thing, but let's see, if I can't, without watching you do this, I might not know why you're getting that pull-off sound, but maybe like me, today you happen to have your fingernail is just a little longer than it should be. Mine are too. And that can run interference when you're moving between any strings, not necessarily just bass notes here on the left hand. But what you might do, let's see if we can tackle this. Since we're only playing, try this. Since we're only playing bass notes anyway, just for a minute, see if this helps you. Lift that index finger, this little one that's down here. Only play your middle two fingers, the ones that you're actually playing with your thumb, okay? And then only play these two and just move back and forth at a steady tempo. See if you can clean it up. Keep your middle finger down. What I'm trying to get into your middle finger's little head is that this is not a big dramatic movement, okay? It should be very minimal and very smooth. And so you might just work on that all by itself and see if you can smooth it out. If you can, then add this finger back down. Even though we're not playing it, that introduces a stretch into your hands, and that's gonna maybe feel a little different. Try this again. See if you can still play it smooth. And if you can, when you get to where you can, try to jump right into your three-string pattern. What I suspect is probably going on is that you're looking at this and you're like, wow, I gotta move, I'm in the middle of something and I gotta move that while things are going on. And what our tendency is to exaggerate movements when we're doing something that we think is difficult or new. And what we want to do is introduce the repetitions of doing it smoothly by simplifying everything else. We're looking for minimal movement here, and what we don't want is what I call winging off, lifting off big. It could be a pull off, maybe you're coming off before that string quit ringing, things like that. The other thing that's kind of subtle here that I'm noticing is that as I play that note, I don't normally pick up here, right before I lift it, I'm killing it with a little bit of a mute there. It makes it a little cleaner. And you can do that by simply just slowing down how fast you come off of that string, okay? But if you're actually getting a pull off, which was your question, that makes me suspect that you've got a flexibility strain going on here. That's why I wanted you to try it without this finger down for a while. Try just that and see if that doesn't help. Do some repetitions here and then add the complexity back in and strive for slow and smooth, okay? And then add all your fingers. All right. And since we were talking about that, I wanted to point out, I noticed I was doing something during the lesson that might have raised questions in your mind. A couple of chords, I fingered a couple of different ways on the fly. There's, for example, let's start with the A chord. If you open Mel Bay Book 1 from the 1960s, old Mel Bay taught us to play the A chord this way, with fingers 1, 2, and 3 stacked in that order. My fingers are too big for that to be comfortable. So along about in high school, I did a shift and played with fingers 2, 3, and 4. This guy being tiny, that gave me a little more room in this little stacked mess here. But more recently, what I've been doing is playing it this way. And to explain what's going on, I'm playing the ring finger on the second string, index finger on the third string, and then the middle finger on the fourth string, okay? I find that to be pretty comfortable, but you may have also noticed that one time during our drill, I did a simple little partial bar there, because I knew we weren't playing chords anyway, but that's another way. There's multiple ways to play an A chord. This, 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 and this, okay? It's not a right or wrong here. You use whatever is comfortable for you and probably also what's needed at that point in time. I might fret that chord differently depending on what the next chord is, or what the chord is I just came from, or because it frees me up to get a melody note. There's lots of different reasons to do these. As long as you're playing the right notes, There's not a right or wrong way to use fingers down here, especially for today since we're only talking about the thumb, but in case you noticed that, that's what's going on. Same thing with the D. I played the D this way, and then I played the D minor, and I was muffling a few strings. That's because my preferred way to play a D minor is with my pinky for the same reason. It uses a smaller finger, it lets things stretch out, leaves my index finger or my ring finger available for other fun stuff. So if you see me throughout this course fret a chord one way and then do it differently another time, that's not meant to confuse you. It's because I like to use different fingerings on all of those. Okay.
I have an interesting question here from Steve. How would you play these patterns in 3/4 time? I don't know.
Oh boy. All right, somebody caught me. I debated whether or not to include that into this lesson set, but let's deal with it real quickly here because it is important. In 4/4 time, you have an even number of notes in a measure, an even number of beats in a measure, right? We count 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we want a bass pattern that gives us 4 beats, and we want to kind of emphasize the downbeat, right? So the idea of 3/4 time, for anybody that doesn't know what that is, some people call it waltz time. It's this: 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Well, now I'm just doing an accompaniment pattern. But let's say that I wanted a thumb pattern for that. Typically, what I'll default to for that is a simple 3 in a row, like this. So now I've got 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Notice that the downbeat is still the root note. So all I'm doing for 3/4 time is starting with the root note and then playing the next 2 strings underneath it in that chord. That works a lot of the time. There might be exceptions where you have to alternate it, but that's the easiest one that I know. Okay? So you might try that as a starter place.
Okay, next question is from R. Simpson. He's new to the thumb pick, and he's wondering what angle your pick is hitting the strings. It almost looks horizontal from here.
That's an excellent question, and it probably most of the time looks pretty horizontal to you. And we have a couple of angles to talk about here. One is the angle going into the strings. So am I holding the pick perfectly perpendicular to the guitar? Am I laying it down, or somewhere in between? The other angle you could talk about is this way, right? How much am I rolling in and out with my wrist? But I'm going to guess that you meant the pick on the strings. It varies, okay, and for a variety of reasons. If I really want to play with a super light touch, in this regard, the thumb pick principle is the same as a flat pick. The more you dig in, the louder of a sound you're going to get, the harsher the attack is going to be. So if I'm holding it really flat, and then what I call digging in, which means pushing it into the strings pretty deep, and then I punch that out that way, we're going to get a big sound, right? If I'm playing. Then what I'll do is I'll not only not dig in so far, but I'll also lay it down at a little bit of an angle. There's basically less resistance, less attack on the strings. You would also do that if you were trying to do a light strum, or if you wanted a heavy strum. You change that angle and you dig in more. Okay. this is a touch feel thing that you have to learn by doing the repetitions, just like your homework this week. Part of what's going to happen as you do the same thing over and over again is your thumb is going to learn by feel what produces loud sounds and what produces soft sounds. And so a good starting point, rule of thumb, if you will, is to start with it flat and dig in a little ways and play that way. And then as a part of your drill, while you're practicing this week, experiment with changing that angle. Experiment with stiffening it up by digging in a little more, and you'll hear it, and you'll start to feel it. You have, with fingerstyle, you have a lot of what I think of as knobs, right? We can control the volume. We can control the sustain of the strings. We can do a lot of things to tweak the sound in different ways. And you get those by experimenting over a long period of time. There's oftentimes, everybody says, well, what's the technique for getting this particular sound? Well, sometimes the difference in a technique is just subtle by how tense your hand is or how much you're digging into the string. When we talk about palm muting, we'll talk about a huge variety of things you can do to change palm muting up. And it's not really possible for me to tell you, you need to do your palm muting exactly right there. And you need to hold your pick at exactly this angle. Because first of all, you're going to want to change that. And second of all, until you get the feel of it, it might be different for you than somebody else. So I'm not trying to dodge your question there. Start with it flat, but it's good that you asked that because that's something that I hope you'll experiment with as you go along.
And Jim, do you file down your thumb pick at all while we're talking about the thumb pick?
That's a great question, and lots of players do. Chet Atkins always modified his thumb pick. I've found a pick that I'm really happy with the way it comes, and so I don't have to now. This pick fits me really well. I like the length of it, if you will, how far I can dig in, and I also like hold this where the camera can see it. I also like this pretty rounded shape here. It's actually almost a bit like a flat pick when you get out to the tip here. And so I can pinch it. I can treat it like a flat pick sometimes when I want to. I don't do that very often, but I can. But it just so happens that I'm lucky in this particular pick. I like the way it comes. If you want to modify it, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. The only challenge is, if you're like me, half these things end up with the TV remote in the couch cushion or between the seats in the truck or all over the place. And so I have thumb picks everywhere. And it would be a little challenging, I think, for me to get the modifications done exactly the same on all 24 of my thumb picks. But that's a minor detail. If you need to modify it, go ahead. There's nothing wrong with that.
And maybe just to piggyback off of that, you got Jack photo here
Upstroke
that,
strumming with a thumb pick. That's a good question too. And couple of things, since we were just talking about angle. On an upstroke, the angle is critical because think about how your thumb hangs on, or how your pick hangs onto your thumb. It's kind of a wrap, right? But it's open. This thing can flex open. And usually where the problem comes in upstroking with a thumb pick is if you're maybe playing with a bit of a down angle, which if you're strumming, you probably are to some degree. If you try to bring that thumb pick back up at the same angle, that string's going to slide right under there and try to tear that thumb pick off of your thumb. So if you're going to do this, you've got to train your thumb to angle it down on the downstroke and then roll it up a little bit on the upstroke. Again, you're doing the same thing with a flat pick to some degree. You're either angling that flat pick up or you're at least relaxing your grip on the flat pick enough that it allows that pick to do that. Well, you can't relax the grip of your thumb pick. That's a fixed deal, right? So the only thing you can do is you've got to roll. You can do it with your wrist. Roll that wrist down and then up a little bit. If you want to see an example of somebody that does this really well, look at YouTube videos of Lyle Lovett playing. he does a lot of, I mean, he's just strumming rhythm, but a lot of the time he's doing it with a thumb pick, and it can work. I'm also fortunate, again, in this thumb pick choice that it fits me really tightly, but not so tight as to be uncomfortable. But this pick does a really good job of hanging on. And so the picking surface out here is kind of thin, which I want, but the strap, it's tapered. The strap around here is thick, so there's not a lot of give. It hangs on good, but it's got a reasonable thickness for the picking surface. And since I've bragged on this thumb pick, somebody's going to ask me what it is. This is made by Fred Kelly, and this is called a slick pick, and in the light gauge. When they say light gauge, again, they're talking about out here, not the support around your thumb. Okay? And let's see. More questions.
Here's one from Maggie Dog. I have problems using a thumb pick. If I use a regular pick with the thumb and index, will I run into problems using the middle ring and pinky for the higher strings?
Okay, I'm glad you asked that question, because when I was talking about different styles of fingerstyle, I left one out earlier, and I meant to at least mention this. If you use, and I don't have one in my hands right now, but if you take a regular flat or plectrum pick and hold it like you normally would for strumming or single note picking, it takes your thumb and your index finger to hold that pick, right? You have to pinch it. Well, then by definition, this finger is not available to pick strings, okay? That's okay. If you can get along without it, you still have fingers, what I would call 2, 3, and 4, your middle ring and pinky. Now, in my finger style with the thumb pick, I don't ever pick with the pinky. This thing is useless to me as a picking digit, okay? But if you're going to sacrifice your index finger to hold a plectrum and then still pick with your other fingers, you're probably going to want to develop that. 2 will get the job done, but you may want more. This is called hybrid picking. You'll hear that term. You'll see people do it. Lots of people use it to great effect. I think what I'm hearing you ask, will you run into problems using the middle ring and pinky? You won't. I don't know if you'll run into problems or not. I do, and here's why. When I tie up my index finger holding a pick, I seem to lose a lot of flexibility and mobility in the adjacent finger, okay? You've probably seen this, kids play this game where they'll say, well, put your hand down on the table and tuck your middle finger in, all right, and then one at a time lift all your other fingers. This works good, and the pinky works good, but unless you're really different than me, the finger right next to the one that you've locked down, I can't lift that finger. So if I did the same thing with this finger, i.e. holding a flat pick, I can move those 2 pretty good, but I can't lift my middle finger. And that may not be the exact physiology that's going on there, but I wonder if that's why when I'm doing this with a flat pick, I just feel really clumsy and slow picking with the other fingers. But that's just me. You can find lots of guitar players that do it just fine. So if you practice it, my expectation would be that you could get good at anything you want to get good at, and that's probably one of them. It doesn't work for me, but there's nothing wrong with it.
Maybe to piggyback on that with the other fingers and the pinky, how do you feel about the anchor, putting your pinky down as an anchor on the guitar?
This is a very controversial question, but it's a good one. What Canyon Hiker is asking about here is actually resting on my picking hand, resting the pinky, either on some people do it on the bridge, some people put it on the face of the guitar, some people might rest it on the first string to stabilize, if you will, the rest of your picking hand. Some people call this the pinky anchor, okay? Anchoring your whole arm on the guitar using your pinky. Since I'm not going to pick with it, why not give it another job to do? If you do this and you're taking strict traditional classical guitar lessons, you'll get slapped on the wrist with a ruler. That's against the rules. If you take classic banjo, 3-finger Scruggs style banjo lessons, that's the way you're taught, is you hook the pinky on the bridge, and that's your orientation for your 3-fingered rolls. For me, what tends to happen is much of the time I don't have an anchor going. But if I'm doing 3-fingered rolls, like on the banjo, it tends to feel natural for me to put it down. So I actually do both. I put it down sometimes when it helps, and I take it up other times when it's in the way. If you're doing a strummy kind of a technique, that anchor is, you don't want that, right? It's in the way. But sometimes doing the rolls, it feels a little more stable. I think, if I evaluated my playing in the last 5 years, I think I'm doing it less and less, okay? But it's a personal preference thing. There's not a right or wrong thing there. As long as you're playing the right notes, you're okay.
Okay. Probably know the answer to this one, but is there any chance you cover some palm muting? I know that's coming up.
There
in
is
the
not
series.
only a chance, it is in the lesson plan. I have to look at the lesson plan to tell you whether that's week 6 or 7, but I'm going to dedicate almost an entire lesson to it, and the reason for that is because there's an effect that sounds like palm muting, but there's a whole lot more going on than just your palm. And even with fingerstyle, we got to learn how to do partial palm muting and other things. So I'm actually going to dedicate an entire lesson to that, and that is coming up.
Alrighty. This one's from Larry Hailu. I would like more tips on how to change chords fast enough on left hand with this style.
Okay. Well, Larry, I hope you heard the tip I briefly covered by accident on the fly earlier, and that idea was, if you remember, or if you were here, I talked about when I'm on a chord and then I'm going to another chord, using this thumb pattern style that I'm teaching today, with a few exceptions. Usually when I'm going to a new chord, the first thing in that new chord I want to hit is the root note. So I'll fret that note first and play it with my thumb, while at the same time laying in the rest of the chord. Okay, so it's not an immediate changeover. So I kind of fade into or ease into the next chord. I don't know how. I actually have taught fairly detailed lessons on some things that you can do to work through this. If there's 2 chords that are giving you trouble, going back and forth between, take a look at those 2 chords. What's one of, like, G and B minor? You get that one a lot. Well, with fingerstyle, again, I got this root note oriented bass, and when I go from this G to the B minor, what's the root note there in a B minor? It's the B note, and then I'm going to play a bar chord. So switching, for example, from an open chord to a bar chord is one that gives a lot of people trouble. I would teach that while you're working on that transition, get that B note first with your index finger, hit that note first, and then lay into the rest of the chord on or about the same time. But you don't have to be stressed about exactly nailing it. Oh, I missed. Hear that? Root note, root note. So those root notes between those 2 chords becomes my priority. It's also visually what I'm looking at, by the way. If I was to go from here all the way up to a big high C bar chord up here, on a transition like that, especially when it's jumping a long ways, my eyes will drift up here to where I'm going to. I already got that chord. I don't need to look at it anymore. Visually, I'm up here, not just looking at the 8th fret, I'm looking at that root note and thinking to myself, I got to hit that with my index finger So it's like shooting a target. That's my target. Once I get that, then I can come in with the rest of the chord kind of after the beat, or as long as it's there in time, but I know that has to be there first and on time. So I'll look for anchor notes, and they may not always be a root note. It depends on when the chord change happens, etc. But look for the first thing in that chord you got to hit, and usually it's a root note. Aim for that first and then build your chord. See if that doesn't help.
Okay, we've had a few inquiries about this. I know you talked a little bit about it in the beginning, but do you need a thumb pick or can you use a bare thumb? Maybe you could go over that again.
Yeah, you can do it with or without a thumb pick. And I don't want to give away too much of the palm muting lesson because we've got a lot to cover there, but let me just suggest to you one place where a thumb pick is quite a bit different than playing with a bare thumb. When I talked about this at the beginning of the lesson, I showed you that if you take your thumb pick off, you're not using one, typically that's going to require you to put more of an angle on your thumb to get into the strings with at least the corner of your thumb and maybe part of your thumbnail so that you can get a bite, right? Well, what that just did is that just lifted my wrist up off of the strings, up off the face of the guitar to get that thumb angle, okay? Now I'm exaggerating it here, and maybe you can get down and play with the side of your thumb. That doesn't work for me. I need that nail if I'm going to do that. So you could develop playing with the side of your thumb. But what I'm after here is the more parallel my thumb is to the strings, the closer my palm is to the strings, and it's ready to turn palm muting on and off. Whenever I want it, it's down. Whenever I don't want it, it's up. But it's a very subtle movement. Most people that I've watched try to do palm muting without a thumb pick, I see that, and obviously they have to exaggerate this movement up and down unless they're really playing with the side of the thumb, which maybe a really well-developed callus over there could give you some punch, but for me it's almost dead. So for me, in terms of technically playing over here, the big difference is the thumb sets you up to be parallel. Your thumb is parallel to the strings. I like that hand position better. And then the other, big elephant in the room is, no matter what technique you use or how you play, you can't get a thumb pick sound without wearing a thumb pick, okay? You can cheat, you can get good with your nail and you can fake it, but I can still hear the difference, and I think I could with any player. The same thing would be true of hybrid picking. Greg Koch is a great shop guitar player for Fender guitars and does a lot of demonstration stuff for Fender, and he's like the guy's a walking jukebox, and he can play almost anything, but he always does it with a flat pick. And so when he imitates Chet Atkins, which on his left hand, the guy's a genius. He's figured out a lot of Chet's stuff, but he does it with hybrid picking, pinching the flat pick and then using fingers. And I can hear that a mile away. I know that guy's not wearing a thumb pick. Okay, it does have its own distinct characteristic and sound that you can emulate. But if that's the sound you really, really want, I'd suggest you get started with a thumb pick sooner rather than later, because it does take some getting used to if you're not already doing it.
I've had a couple of questions about types of thumb picks and brands. I know for me, like the first time I tried a thumb pick, I think I bought one of those thick plastic National or Dunlop picks, and I like almost gave up because I couldn't even use it. So maybe you can talk about that a little bit.
You called out the two, and I've had them too. In fact, I'm pretty sure that I started with a Dunlop, and Nationals are out there too. And those types tend to be very, very thick, but they're thick throughout the entire body of the thumb pick. Not just the strap, but it's also thick out here. So it's like playing, if you're a flat picker, it's like playing with the heaviest gauge flat pick you could imagine. Now, if you want a gigantic, always whomping Merle Travis sounding thumb, that may be what you want, and then that's fine. As I said earlier, I like this pick because it's thick enough to hang on, but out here it tapers. It's actually almost sharp out here at the end. I would equate that to probably a light gauge flat pick, and I like it that way, and I can still get the punch by digging in with the angles and depth we talked about earlier. Shape of the pick, length of the pick, the material it's made out of, how tight it is. Those are all variables that you're going to have to experiment with. There's picks that are straight up plastic. This is made out of a material called Delrin, which I'm not a chemist. I don't know exactly what that is. But what I like about this is, unlike those plastic Dunlops and Nationals, when my hands warm up, this plastic, plastic gets warm, usually you expect it to get softer, right? Well, if your thumb pick is getting softer, what's going to happen? It's going to start letting go. And I used to have that problem because especially if I'm playing an outdoor gig or you're in a hot room or whatever, or you're just really excited because you're playing something fast, that kind of thing, I have problems with those plastic picks loosening up and slipping. And with this Delrin material, I don't have that problem. Some picks, the blue Herco, our blues instructor on here likes the blue Hercos, and Akai Herman, and I think those are almost like a fiberglass type material, I think, and those guys like those too. What I don't like about those is they're really narrow this way, and I like the wide one. So I'm blabbering on and on about personal preference stuff. There's not a right or wrong. The thing that I would probably steer you away from is using a metal thumb pick. And that's kind of funny because when I learned to play banjo, I play with a plastic thumb pick and then we use metal finger picks, and it works. But I've never heard metal thumb picks sound good on a guitar. And my theory is that it's because your thumb, again, primarily is playing on the biggest 4 strings of the guitar. And on most steel string guitars, those happen to be the strings that all have windings on them. That's this little scratchy stuff, right? Strings 1 and 2 are smooth. There's no winding on them. But up here on these guys, they're wound. And so if you have a metal thumb pick, I think it kind of creates a sizzle and a raspiness there that either doesn't sound good or would be, I think, a challenge to manage. So I would stay with plastic or plastic derivatives. And then the sky's the limit. There are hundreds to choose from.
Okay. Greg GP is also wondering if you'll be getting into Delta Blues style, fingerstyle.
I think by the time we're done, you're going to have the foundations to play Delta Blues type stuff when we get into the palm muting and muting the strings and stuff like that. That is the foundation of a lot of what people call the Delta Blues. But the other thing we're going to cover toward the end of this course too is more than just doing a repeating pattern with your thumb. We're going to shake that up a little bit at the end, and when you're getting into blues, things like that, where now I'm not doing this, right? We're going to want to eventually explore doing something besides thumb patterns, and palm muting, that all plays into that. So Delta Blues isn't one of the 10-week topics. The goal here is to give you in 10 weeks the foundations where you could go tearing off in that or any other direction and have what you need to get started.
Okay, I think this is a good one here. Talking about the B minor, that shape of bar chord, and how you would alternate the bass on that.
Okay, that's a good question, because you hopefully can take what we did today and extrapolate to answer a question like this, and this would be a great way to give an example of how you could do that. Let's go to the chords that I showed you that all had all the chords that had the root note starting on the 5th string had pretty much the same right-hand pattern, which was 5, 4, 6, 4, right? Now let's look at that A minor chord that we learned. It was the same as the A, right? 5, 4, 6, 4. The 5th string is the root note. Now, that's still my A minor chord. I just freed up Mr. Barr here. Still the same. 5, 4, 6, 4. 5, 4, 6, 4. 5, 4, 6, 4. Exactly the same pattern, because even though we're playing this B minor up here now, the root note is still on the 5th string. I'm playing an A minor shaped chord, so that same pattern works. Okay, so by playing that bar chord, I'm basically bringing the whole nut of the guitar up the neck. Same pattern. Okay, same thing with any of these other chords down here. By the way, when we did the E, you probably know this, but that bad old F that we play here is just our E chord played with an F, and guess what? It had the same exact pattern. It does here too, here. Once you take a chord out of first position with a bar, the same thumb patterns that work down here are going to follow you all the way up and down the neck. That's why I want you to get used to seeing that A minor shape, and when you see that A minor shape, your thumb does this, because now I can put that A minor shape anywhere and my thumb already knows what to do, right? That's the beauty of this idea of taking the chord shape approach to it.
And J.R. Davis 01 is wondering, do you heat your thumb pick to get that custom fit or shape?
Yeah, you absolutely can. Again, I'm super lucky. I can take these right out of the mail, right out of the package, and put them on and go. These just happen to come the way I like them. But yeah, absolutely. For example, the most common thing that people do heating them up is that they want them to fit tighter or looser. And so you heat it up in hot water and then just pinch it, twist it down while it cools off. You exaggerate it, and then you let it settle back into a tighter position. And yeah, that's absolutely fine to do. As far as the shape, I guess you could experiment with, maybe this guy was a little too flat and you wanted it more narrow or whatever. You could experiment with shaping it like that too. Two other tricks that I've heard of people that have trouble getting the pick to just hang on. One is to take an X-Acto knife or a very aggressive fingernail file or something like that and actually rough up the inside of the pick so that where it contacts your skin, it's got a little bit of traction. But a neater one than that is Chet Atkins, sideman of 30 some odd years, said that the best way, if you got a thumb pick that's slipping around on you and it's the only pick you got, just wet the tip of your thumb, put it on, and let it dry there. And I don't know why that works, but it does.
All right, that's great. Let's see. Somebody's wanting to know about the difference in the thumb pick for a left-handed player. Nolan Nutt wants to know that.
Yes.
About the pick itself, the actual pick.
Yes, there would be, there might be some generic thumb picks out there. If there are, I don't know about them. But yeah, you do need to order left-hand picks. If you can see, and I don't know whether it's better to show this with it on my thumb or off, but if you look at the shape of that, you can kind of see that where what I call the strap comes over the top. It's not, there we go. They're not exactly parallel where they meet, right? This strap is kind of angled off to the side from the picking shaft. I wonder if they actually have technical names for some of this stuff. I just make them up. But when I put that on my thumb, then here we go. See how I'm running to the end of the, where's my camera? There it is. When I put my thumb in there, you can start to see that that's not directly lined up. It's kind of, again, angled back a little bit, and I think it's also kind of tapered in the thumb hole a little bit. Again, not all picks are going to be the same, of course, but yeah, absolutely, that is a right-handed thumb pick, and I've never had to shop for left-handed thumb picks, so I don't know, how much trouble, how rare it's going to be, but you should be able to find them.
All right, one more here from Plum Hunter. Can you talk about your guitar and why you selected
I
it?
could talk about this guitar all night long, but let me address what I think is probably the more important question here, which is what do you think about when choosing a guitar, and especially for fingerstyle, given that's what we're doing. I kind of laugh when a guitar is billed as being a fingerstyle guitar, because that really almost doesn't mean anything. A classical guitar is a fingerstyle guitar, and it's very, very different than an OM Martin that's got a 1 3/4 inch nut and a thinner body, and it's got a cutaway, and it's a fingerstyle guitar because it's got Lawrence Juber's name on it, and he plays fingerstyle. Usually, first of all, you got to make a choice. And I don't mean to leave electric guitar players out, because fingerstyle works for electric guitar players too. Witness Mark Knopfler, who not only plays fingerstyle, he does it without a thumb pick. But choosing between nylon and steel string guitars is basically a sound choice, a tone choice that you have to decide which one you like better. Yes, the nylon string guitars are a little easier on your left hand in terms of calluses, but typically, not always, but typically they have a much wider neck, and they may or may not like that. If you're talking about steel string acoustic guitars for fingerstyle, a lot of people are going to tell you that fingerstyle needs a lot of fretboard real estate to be played well, and I used to believe that, and I grew up on a classical guitar, so I was used to having 2 inches over here, and my dad's Gibson ES335, I could hardly play it because it was a 1 11/16 inch nut, and to me I just felt really cramped, and it didn't work for me. Well, when my dad passed away and I inherited that guitar, I thought, man, I gotta learn to play this thing. I'm just gonna try. And I quickly found out that it was just a matter of repetition, practice, and I got used to it. And then when I met Tommy Emanuel and saw that he was playing acoustic fingerstyle guitar that had the same nut width, a narrow nut width, I thought, man, there's got to be something to that. Well, there is. Bring that thumb over the top. Some of these fancy, when you start bringing your thumb over the top, if you've got a wide neck, that's going to be hard to do, especially up here. So I made it a point to force myself to learn to play on a narrower neck width, and now it works just fine. Yes, the strings are a little closer together, and yes, when my left hand nails aren't trimmed down where they ought to be, things get a little dicey until I clean that up. And you saw I play alternate versions of the A chord so that I can fit, but you can do that and it works. Other things people worry about with fingerstyle is, well, how high or low should the action be? Shouldn't it be just like as low as possible so that it's easy to play? Well, maybe. Chet Atkins' action was a lot higher than people think on several of his guitars. He, according to some people I've talked to that got this from him, he believed that the tone was better with the higher action. You'll find other players that will actually set that guitar up so that the action is as low as it can possibly be without any buzzing, okay? That's, again, a personal preference thing. So I like the cutaway. You may or may not need the cutaway. I get up here sometimes and do stuff like that, and with large hands, I don't want to be running into the body of the guitar. But if you don't need to do that, no sense compromising the sound box of the guitar and the size of the resonating board here, right? Any guitar can be played fingerstyle. String gauge is an important choice. I'm running lights on this, which means that these are 12s. The first string is a 12 gauge, and it goes up to a 54. beginning guitar players sometimes think, well, if I get lighter gauge strings, it'll be easier to play, and so they'll get 11s, and that's fine, but it's absolutely a volume and tone compromise out of most acoustic guitars. So there's lots of things to think about and choices to make, but almost anything can be adapted to on any guitar. As long as you can play it, then you can learn to play it better by doing the hard work. The question was worded, why did I choose this particular guitar? And I'm laughing because this is a custom built guitar made by Robbie O'Brien in Parker, Colorado. And I chose this guitar because this year was my wife and I's 30th anniversary, and she secretly had Robbie O'Brien build this guitar for me for our 30th anniversary. So I have no choice. However, they did an awesome job plotting it out, and it absolutely is my favorite guitar. It's the only one I'm playing right now, 100% of the time. It's amazing. It's spruce on the top and rosewood back and sides. For a long time, my favorite fingerstyle guitar was a Martin that had mahogany, and man, I re-fell in love with the rosewood sound, and with the bigger box on this guitar is fantastic. So that's why. We're good? Okay. All right, don't forget to do your homework, and we'll be back here next Monday. Same time, same channel, and hope to see you then. Thanks for watching.